Thanks, Santosh. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this duologue. Unfortunately, there's going to be no debating, yeah, because me and Santosh are perfectly aligned on what we want to speak about. What do we? So I was thinking about it. This whole morning, Santosh and me have been looking at all the people in finance and BFSI and insurance and media, advertising. All of them talk, right? And I got the feeling that we were like a couple of rock bikers at a Taylor Swift concert, yeah, because you could easily tell that we were completely out of place. There are like 5 people that I've counted here who work in the healthcare space. So I don't know what the rest of you here are doing. But anyway, we'll try. What the idea of this session is just to introduce you a little bit to what's happening in AI in the healthcare space. And then hopefully, what we'll try and do is we'll close early and allow for a couple of questions because, the idea here is not do a deep dive into all the different aspects of AI because I think I've heard enough of that. So what I'm going to try and attempt in my session, in my talk now for the next couple of minutes, is to not use the word AI at all. Yeah, so I'm going to try that, okay? But before I get to that part, before my clock starts, I wanted to quickly talk about, everybody talks about how healthcare, clinical research development has been a laggard in adoption of, not to be mentioned, the 2 letters that shall not be named. Yeah, and 2 years ago, I was speaking at a clinical research conference, and they asked me to talk about these 2 letters that shall not be named. And so I started my slide saying that AI/ML in clinical research is a little bit like teen sex, at the risk of sounding a little risque, yeah? And why is it like teen sex? Because everybody thinks everybody else is doing it. So therefore, everybody claims that they are doing it. Yeah? And everybody else thinks that everybody else knows how to do it. But in reality, nobody really has a clue. Yeah, so this is where the situation is 2 years ago. Okay, we have come a long way since then, right? And what Santosh and me are going to talk about, so I'm going to start with discovery. Yeah, so the early part of clinical research, right? And then Santosh is going to move into actual clinical research conduct. Yeah, fair enough. And then we will see what the last part is, we can open it up with questions and stuff, okay? So in terms of discovery, so the whole idea, as most of you might know, is that when you start with trying to figure out a drug for a particular disease, right? You have to make the drug first, right? You have to discover the drug, or you have to invent the drug. One of those two things, right? So now the question is, how do you go about doing that, right? So you start with what they call target identification, okay? So they identify either a protein, okay, or a genetic abnormality, right? They identify one of these things and say, this is the cause for the disease, right? So that's the first part, target identification. The second part then becomes actually lead optimization. So they create a bunch of different molecules that can hit that particular target, and then they optimize that. Okay, that's the second part. And the third part is where they start trying this in different models. Okay, so they do it in the lab, they give it to animals, okay, all of those kinds of things. Yeah, so these are the 3 parts of discovery. Okay, and then it moves into clinical research that Santosh is going to talk about. Okay, so what kinds of AI/ML techniques do we use in these 3 areas, right? So you start with something like target, identifying the target, okay, and it's not really Gen AI. So I don't want to talk about Gen AI at all. He's going to talk a little bit about Gen AI, okay? There is a little bit of Gen AI components there, but predominantly the main thing that you do there when you're thinking about targets is looking at random forests, convolution networks, okay? What you're trying to do is identify a particular gene. So you have to say, hey, is this gene relevant to this particular disease? Yeah, and you use recommender systems, you use rankings, all of the different traditional machine learning methods, support vector machines. Those are the kinds of things that you tend to use a lot in the first part, target identification. Yeah. Second, you move to drugs, right, and leads. So you have a number of different molecules, and you want to figure out which molecule will work best. Okay, and there are 2 ways of doing it. Either you identify the protein, so you know the protein structure, or you identify the ligand, which is how it connects. These are the two ways that you can identify if a drug works. When you think about a protein structure, AlphaFold. You guys have heard about AlphaFold? No? Same company that made DeepMind. AlphaGo, the Go thing, same company. Made AlphaFold. Unbelievable. Okay, what used to take months to characterize the structure of a protein, AlphaFold does over a weekend now. So you can give any protein structure, it will give you whether it is a good fit or not. If you know the exact structure of the protein. If you don't know the exact structure of the protein, then you can do it based on ligands. Okay, and there again you use most of these methods, SVMs, graphical networks. Okay, there is the first ever drug, antibiotic drug, discovered by these methods is currently in clinical trials, has moved to actual patient trials. Yeah, so these are the two areas in discovery. And then of course, the third bit is all about modeling, where you do a lot of PK/PD modeling. You try to understand what the drug is doing inside your body, how the body is interacting with the drug. All of those are biomechanistic modeling, along with a lot of neural network modelings. Yeah, and these are the two that actually you use in that whole modeling phase, right? So these are the kinds of things that you use when you're talking about discovery. Yeah, I'm going to pass the baton on to Santosh now, who's going to talk about actual conduct of clinical research.
Yeah, thank you, Mahesh. Can you hear me okay at the last? Okay. How many of us in this room love post-lunch sessions? Lunch is good? Okay. Okay. And thank you for joining us in the Innovation Zone. I heard like there is another session going on from Samir. But I wanted to make sure I want to make sure, as Mahesh mentioned, we don't want to bore you with AI, because this is something we have been hearing from the morning. I want to take some typical examples which we have implemented in the pharma industry. And as you all know, it's a heavy regulated domain which pharma industry is into. So, I sit in global clinical data management space where there are potential use cases from study setup, conduct, and the submission, and also the operational efficiency within the clinical trial process. So I'm going to take a couple of examples. One is around the novel machine learning approach that we did on the therapeutic area. So sorry if I use some jargons which is more specific to the clinical domain. So therapeutic area on the renal space. So we did a quick analysis on the machine learning approach for the CKD patients, which is chronic kidney disease for the renal patients. So we took the data sets from the openly available CKD data, Optum, and CKD Coherent data, and also some of the internal database that we have within the organization. And we ran the quantile regression as well as some of the prediction model, right, within this approach. So the purpose was to understand how early we can diagnose the CKD patients, because there are no symptoms within the CKD journey. So it's a well-known problem, and we were working on that as a recent use case which I can think of. And I know a lot of us heard about and spoke about Gen AI, but what I wanted to stress upon is, and I'm going to take one real example also from my organization, is we don't use the openly available ChatGPT solution. So what we did was we created our own private validated ChatGPT environment. So what is the differential value, or what is that we are trying to do is, let it be Pfizer or AstraZeneca or any of the pharma industries, right? We treat data as an asset. So we deal with patients' data. So it is important for us, we deliver value to our patients and we protect the data as much as possible, keeping compliance in mind. Data privacy, all these topics, right, which you would have heard about in the previous session, or you will be hearing in the future session. So what we did was we had a private validated environment which we have to leverage, and still we are in the pilot phase in terms of evaluating how we can get the prompts and basically the prompt engineering part that we can do with the ChatGPT. And we used GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 turbos as models. And again, it's a replica of what you can see in the open ChatGPT, but the only difference is we don't store the data and we don't expose the data to Microsoft or third-party vendors or any of the parties that is involved. So that's the only differential value from it. Okay, I'm just switching the gear to responsible AI. I just want to ask this question to the audience. How many of you in this room have heard of GPay, GPAI? Can you please raise hand? Okay, I see one person. Okay, a couple of them. Okay, a couple of months back, there was a global consortium. If you want to take a note of it, global partnership on artificial intelligence. Go and search on it. You will find it touches upon one of the key initiative on responsible AI. So all the global AI leaders, and I attended that from the industry perspective. So it touches upon the responsible AI, how we are going to handle the data ethically and responsibly. That's very much critical coming from a pharma domain. I hope Mahesh acknowledged that. So please do visit into that and keep a watch on it, right? Because the way I see is, as a participant, what I'm going to get out from this session. So I will highly recommend you to follow that GPAI, which talks about future of work, responsible AI, and some of the other initiatives where you can keep yourself updated around what is happening around the world or around AI. Okay, I'm going to talk about a few other use cases before I pass it on to Mahesh for digital AI is synthetic data generation. So this is one use cases which we started looking at on how we can artificially generate data. So there are a couple of dimensions which we have started with. One is like we have built, since I sit under global data management clinical programming, we did build some SAS scripts to generate this synthetic data. So what it helps us with when we do the data ingestion, there are, and you know, right, we want to accelerate the clinical trial process being in the pharma industry. So what we did was we wanted to reduce the complexity with the different systems, and we want to streamline this in terms of accelerating this clinical trial process, especially the overall clinical trial journey. We want to reduce the DB log, we call it DB log from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. So that's something we stepped into. It's more like a transformation program that is going through within the pharma industry. And so we kind of picked this synthetic data generation as one of the use case which we are looking into. And also we are looking into how we can kind of use some of the Python libraries in terms of generating the synthetic data to support our pre-trained ML model. So that's something we are looking at. So that's one of the use case I can think of.
Santosh, that red screen has come up saying time's up.
Okay.
That one.
All right, that's all I wanted to talk about. I'll pass it on to Mahesh.
No, I think we'll close. I know I want to leave some time for questions anyway, but this is just a flavor. There's a lot of other stuff that's happening. Digital twins. How do you model an entire person or an organ? How do you take data from wearables and devices, and how do you validate that? How do you write the right algorithms to mimic actual clinical outcomes? A lot of the other kinds of things that are going on. But then again, with 10 minutes, that's the best that you can get, right? So we'll stop here, maybe open it up for a couple of questions.
So do we have any questions?
Yeah, there is one.
Yeah, can you repeat it?
You mentioned about a particular site for the clinical data.
Yeah.
Availability of clinical. What is that site?
Optum, and the other one is Clinical Data Link.
Clinical data?
Data links.
Links.
Clinical data links. And we also have an internal clinical trial database where we kind of load all the data sets and we kind of use it for the pre-training data.
So are you using SVD or SDB for synthetic data generation?
Yes. Yes.
There's one more in the back.
Just a follow-up on that. Is it aggregated data that you're talking about? Like you did mention about the data privacy, right?
Yeah.
So if you have data, then you mask the data, keep it, or how do you manage the privacy there? Or you aggregate them?
It's a tough question. So we have to dummy the data actually.
Right.
So we go back and we anonymize the data. So we strip it away from all the demographic information, any identifying information, and then we are able to use the data, provided the patients whose data it is have given us access. So a lot of our companies are now going back and asking patients access to the data that we had generated from before, saying we want to use it for this purposes.
Yeah, so you strip them off of the PII, personally
Exactly.
identifiable
Yeah.
data, and then use it.
Yeah.
Do you also do aggregation, like the region-wise?
We do a lot of aggregation, but that doesn't help us much.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
most of the time you want to look at, when you're building a model, model works better with actual individual data than the aggregate data. So yeah, so we do some level
That
of
makes
aggregation,
sense.
but
Okay, that makes sense. I think we have one more question.
How effective it is to generate the data artificially for getting the variety, because it becomes very difficult when we go to the real-time usage of those algorithms.
yeah, so it's a fair point, but I think a lot of so you're talking about variety when you're generating synthetic data.
Right.
A lot of times what we do is that we use existing data, right? And then we take a bunch of one of the ways that I had generated data for my team was we took the first 4 or 5 quartiles, right?
Okay.
Summary measures of, and then we took that and then started to generate based on that, right? So when you start to do that, you basically are able to pick up all the nuances of the data set that you currently have, right? That's one way to do it. The second way to do it is that we are helped a lot. So, it's very rare that you do only black box neural net kind of modeling. So a lot of times you accentuate that with biomechanistic modeling as well, right? So that the need for large amounts of data gets reduced a little bit because there is the concept of the biomechanistic modeling also that you're doing.
Okay, definitely we'll connect offline. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Yeah, hi. I have 2 questions. The first one is when you're working on a synthetic data generation or similar sort of a use case, what is your approach between build versus buy? You want to build something in-house with your expert data scientists or principal data scientists available with you, or you are trying to evaluate off-the-shelf products? So that's my first question. And the second thing is, if at all, if you are choosing, if at all, if you are preferring a off-the-shelf tool, how are you trying to evaluate the effectiveness of that tool? I see this issue is lying with most of the build versus buy scenarios where they are going little complex AI sort of features.
Yeah.
It could be anomaly detection or something like so. Yeah,
sure.
please.
So if I can take that question very quickly, different companies have different ways. So I'm not going to talk about all the different companies, but one group of companies, what they end up doing is that they run these grand challenges or hackathons, right? So they give out the problem to whoever wants to try and attempt it. They publicize it widely. They choose about 8 or 10 final contestants. Everybody gets the same data set, everybody gets the same problem. And then we look for a solution which matches closely to what our expectations are, right? So that informs our decision of build versus buy. So if you're able to get something that people have built for us and we can buy it, then great. If that doesn't work, then we go for our own internal teams to build it, because we have the domain expertise, we feel sometimes.
And just to add on, in my case, we have an in-house team, data curators who are very enthusiastic. So to answer the first question, we are currently using the in-house tools.
Okay,
That
so
sounds great.
very little
Sounds
chance of going off the shelf tools, if I say.
Do you have intentions to go off the shelf?
Yeah,
as well?
we do all the time. Yeah.
So build versus buy, they are equally supporting both,
Yeah.
right? Is that a right sum up?
Sure, thanks.
Okay, great. So I have a curious question before I sum it up. You did mention that you have domain expertise. What kind of domain expertise do you expect in a clinical trial?
Sure. So in a clinical trial, you need different kinds, right? You need a medical doctor, you need a data manager, you need a programmer.
Yeah,
you need a
especially
statistician.
around the data and the analytics.
Right.
and
But when you're
AI.
talking about the AI, ML, the letters that shall not be named, those kinds of things, it all depends on exactly the kind of problem that you're trying to solve. So we tend to have different verticals. So we have a vertical that focuses on operational AI. And there we are looking for people with very strong machine learning model experience, algorithm experience, and generative AI and all of those kinds of things, right? So that's the operational AI bit. Then we have a team that's focused on clinical AI. And there you're talking about people typically with a PhD in computational biology, systems engineering, all of those kinds of things, right? That come with very, very strong biology experience so that they can identify the right, subgroup, patient subgroups, variable reduction, all of those kinds of things, right? And the third bit is, we have a team that's focused on digital AI. So devices, wearables, where you need different kinds of modeling experience, time series modeling, those kinds of things, right? So depending on which type of problem we are trying to solve, we have different teams and we hire the right kind of talent to each of those different teams.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for your time.